One of the craziest stories in all of video games and sports is something known as the Madden Curse.
What do you need?
I need to, curse someone.
What kind of curse?
Death curse.
The Madden Curse is a phenomenon that appeared to affect the cover athlete of Madden NFL games beginning with the 1998 release of Madden NFL 99, which was the very first time the video game series featured anyone but John Madden on the cover. Madden 99 specifically featured San Francisco 49ers running back Garrison Hearst. The curse would either bring about an injury to the cover athlete, a complete downturn in production, or some other unfortunate mishap in the NFL's ensuing season. For Hearst, he would break his ankle that season so bad he would not only miss that entire year, but the following year as well. It could be argued the curse didn't see any reprieve until 14 years later with Madden NFL 13, when Calvin Johnson was featured on the cover in 2012 and had arguably one of the greatest seasons of all time by a wide receiver by breaking the single season receiving yard record. With Megatron's fantastic 2012, the Madden Curse hasn't been entirely lifted as some cover athletes have had their fair share of woes, but it's no longer a foregone conclusion every season. But this phenomenon got me thinking about other sports. Were baseball players just as unlucky? How about the NBA, NHL, or even the WWE? This miniseries aims to find out just that. Do cover athletes in other sports suffer the same fate as their football counterparts, or is there no such thing as a curse? If you're new to the channel and enjoy content like this, hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with new videos. And be sure to also hit the like button, as that is how others will find this channel just like you did. Our first foray into this project is Major League Baseball. Baseball is a fickle sport in which many players can find themselves on the wrong side of Tommy John surgery or have a serious case of the yips. Likewise, some may even succumb to an injury, and that is the slippery slope to irrelevancy as they spend more time on the IL than the field. To test out the waters of a potential MLB video game curse, we'll be looking at the MLB The Show video game series primarily produced for the PlayStation family of consoles. It's only been recent that the show has found its way to the Xbox and Nintendo ecosystems, but we have had MLB The Show games in name since 2006, and that is where we will start. For the most part, we will look at player stats, all brought to you by the wonderful page Baseball Reference, for the season they graced the cover of MLB The Show, and whether they suffered an injury that majorly affected their year or suffered in some other crazy way that year. The very first game that had the honor of being called The Show was the 2006 version of PlayStation's exclusive baseball franchise. On the cover was Big Papi himself, David Ortiz, the first of 3 Red Sox players to grace the show's cover. If you're hoping to find out the show would begin the same way Madden did, well...
But I'm afraid I've got some bad news.
Big Papi would have not only what would have been his best year to date, but arguably the best year of his career. This of course followed up a great 2005 that got him the cover in the first place. But for the first and only time in his career, David Ortiz hit 50 home runs when he sent 54 baseballs over fences across North America. Additionally, he drove in 137 runs and drew a career-high 119 walks. Believe it or not, his RBI total was the second highest in his career compared to the prior season when he had 148. This was producing a 5.8 WAR for the year, and he slashed a 287, 413, 636 with an OPS of 1,049. You may be wondering, with numbers like these, surely he was most valuable player. Nope. He actually placed 3rd in voting that year. So what was good enough to beat him here? Justin Morneau of the Twins was the MVP that season, hitting 20 less home runs, but producing almost just as many RBIs with only 7 less than Ortiz. But he was far more consistent swinging the bat with a batting average of .321 versus Ortiz 287. Ortiz was fantastic that season, but still didn't receive a single first place vote, and something to consider is that Ortiz was only on the field half the time, as he was the designated hitter for every game he played that year except for 10, when he was at first base in what I'm only assuming were games in National League ballparks that year. Add this fantastic years to his Silver Slugger and All-Star nomination this season, safe to say MLB The Show didn't start with a curse, unless the Red Sox missed in the playoffs this season counts for you, but for me, it doesn't. Not too far from Boston, we saw another big man grace the cover of MLB The Show with Met third baseman David Wright. If you're a fan of curses, well, you may want to skip the 2007 version of MLB The Show as well, because this was statistically the greatest year of David Wright's entire career. Wright was a pretty consistent player throughout the majority of his career, save for the final seasons, but in 2007 particularly, he would see his second All-Star nomination, his highest spot of MVP vote getters, as well as his first Gold Glove and Silver Slugger awards of his career. Wright put up a WAR of 8.3 that season, playing in every game but 2 that year. He recorded 189 hits, which would be the second highest of his career, in which 42 of those would be for doubles, his high watermark for 2-baggers. Wright would go on to slash .325, .416, .546 with an OPS of .963, a very reliable bat in the Mets lineup. But like his cover star predecessor, David Wright's team would miss a playoff, so again, if you count that for being cursed, then you are up 2-0. But 2007 did see David Ortiz's Red Sox get into the playoffs and sweep the Rockies to win the World Series. So maybe that means the Mets win it all next year?
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
For a third straight year, a ball player representing the East Division graces the cover of MLB The Show, this time in the form of Philadelphia Philly Ryan Howard. And boy, what a fun case study Ryan Howard's 2008 season is. I'm going to get to the end and work my way backwards here. Ryan Howard finished second in MVP voting in 2008. So with no other notes so far, he must have had a good year, right? Right? For someone that finished second in MVP voting, surely he made the All-Star game, yes? Well, no. Take a peek at Ryan Howard's 2008 up until the Midsummer Classic. Those that root for curses would have felt vindicated with how 2008 started for Ryan Howard. The first month of the season saw Ryan Howard sport a batting average of 172, and he wouldn't break past the Mendoza line until May 22nd that season. Not until Independence Day would Ryan Howard see his batting average get above 220 for the year, and a week later, you've already seen his All-Star break average of 234. His power numbers were there, almost hitting 30 home runs and having 84 RBIs by the break, but he took a long time to heat up, and with over 100 strikeouts also at this point, it's not entirely surprising he missed the All-Star game. But it's not always how you start, it's how you finish. With 30 less games in the second half of the year, Howard almost matched his production from the first half of the season, recording only 17 less hits, 2 more doubles, the same amount of triples, only 8 less home runs, and just a little over 20 RBIs less. He was also luckier as his BABIP rose nearly 30 points as well. The power numbers were incredible that year for Howard, and his second half resurgence got him the second most first place votes that year for MVP. Despite striking out 199 times that year and posting an absolutely atrocious 1.8 WAR, Howard put up 48 home runs and 146 RBIs. Both numbers were far and away the most in both categories, and they weren't even close, 40 and 130 being second place respectively. Pujols went nuts that year with a 9.2 WAR, 37 home runs, 116 RBIs, 104 walks, and a stupid slash line of 357, 462, 653, and an OPS of 1.114. But Howard won a World Series that year, so yeah, no curse here either. Another cover, another East Division team, and another Red Sox player. Dustin Pedroia was the 2009 cover athlete for MLB The Show. When Ryan Howard was getting beat up by Pujols for the MVP award on the National League side, it was Dustin Pedroia winning on the American League side in 2008. So how would Pedroia follow up that season? Well, he certainly came back to earth, but still had himself another all-star worthy season. Pedroia would produce a solid 5.6 WAR that included a solid slash line of 296, 371, 447, and an OPS of 819. This included coming just shy of another 200 hit season where he recorded 185 hits, and one of those hits included hitting a home run in his very first at-bat of the season.
The bottom one, no score. Delta Bravo to Foxtrot Charlie, request permission to blast. Delta Bravo, permission granted.
Some curse-adjacent notes you could place for Dustin Pedroia would be that the Red Sox were swept right out of the playoffs that year, and the Yankees ended up being the World Series champions. Additionally, you could also say it counts because Pedroia broke his foot the following year, but the season after that one, Dustin Pedroia won his second Gold Glove and had his best season by producing a staggering WAR of 8.0. I think it's safe to say that Dustin Pedroia continues a streak of good to great seasons by MLB The Show cover athletes. For our next cover athlete, we get to combine the following two games because it featured the same player for the first and only time in the show's history. Twins perennial all-star catcher Joe Mauer. This was a fact that 14 years ago had some people very displeased, as shown by this post from Game FAQs. What a time to be alive when Game FAQs was my de facto internet home. And spoiler alert, if Joe Mauer was the cover athlete 2 seasons in a row, I think you know how the summary for the 2010 season is going to go. Joe Mauer played out of his gourd with this season in 2009, so anything after that year is going to look bad in comparison. While 2010 didn't feature his astronomical 365, 444, 587, and an OPS of 1.031 slash line, 2010 would become Joe Mauer's 3rd straight season getting an All-Star nod, a Gold Glove, a Silver Slugger Award, and MVP votes. 2010 would feature Joe Mauer actually topping his double total from the year prior when he doubled 43 times versus 30 the year before. His power numbers and almost everything else did drop in 2010, especially his home run total. Saw that drop from 28 to 9. But 9 was pretty close to what he was averaging at the time every single season. The 28 dingers in 2009 almost beat his last 3 seasons combined, which was a total of 29. Despite some of the lower power contributions, he still walked 65 times, only struck out 53 times, and was remarkably consistent offensively, slashing 327, 402, 469 with an OPS of 871. As for the playoffs, like Pedroia the year before, Mauer and his Twins were swept out of the first round by the Yankees. But what about the second year he was featured on the cover? Well, if you're rooting for curses, I think we might finally have one for you. Heading into the 2011 season, Mauer had undergone knee surgery, and with this, missed the majority of spring training. And due to consistent complications with his rehabilitation, Mauer missed most of the first half of the season and didn't return to full-time action until June 17th of that year. Joe Mauer would start finding himself in other positions due to his knee surgery, most prominently first base, and of course, designated hitter. Mauer would also be in right field for a spell. Mauer didn't have a bad season by Major League standards, but by his standards, it was considered his worst year up to this point in his career. His average of 287 was his worst mark at the end of a season after holding a career average of over 320 to this point. For a single season, we can look at Joe Mauer on the cover of MLB The Show 11 as the first curse-ridden season, putting the curse on the board for the very first time. But if you are curious if Mauer ever recovered, he absolutely did, putting up all-star worthy seasons the following 2 years and even getting some down-ballot nods for MVP in 2012. And speaking of 2012, for the 3rd time, a Boston Red Sox would be featured on the cover of MLB The Show. Well, kind of. This would be the first time that an MLB The Show cover athlete would be a part of 2 clubs in the same season. And while there isn't a whole heck of a lot to remark about Adrian Gonzalez's 2012 campaign, it wasn't bad, and certainly not curse-worthy. He certainly fell off from his high marks the year before that earned him the cover of the show in the first place. But he was still a reliable player at the dish, slashing 299, 344, 463 with an OPS of 806, still driving in over 100 runs, and he fell just shy of 200 hits with 188 at the end of the season across both his tenures with the Red Sox and Dodgers. He would continue to get better with the Dodgers the next few seasons as well. For this video, this was an unremarkable year, but it was still a solid year for the 5-time All-Star. The best thing about the 2012 edition of the show was shown up on the PlayStation Vita for the first time, one of my favorite consoles of all time. And its ability to continue the same franchise save across both the PS3 and the Vita was game-changing at the time, like the Switch before the Switch. If you played the show on the Vita, let me know in the comments below. It took almost 10 seasons, but the National League Central finally got its first representation on the cover of MLB The Show. And just as long as it took for an NL Central player to reach the cover of MLB The Show, the same rings true for the cover athlete to win the MVP award, which is exactly what Kutch did in 2013. He posted a 7.8 WAR that saw him stealing 27 bases, hit 38 doubles, accumulate 21 home runs with 84 runs driven in, and he produced a slash line of 317, 404, 508 with an OPS of 911. This was following a year where he arguably was better offensively, hitting 10 more home runs and falling just 6 short of 200 hits for the year and producing an OPS plus of 162, beating his MVP year of 157. During the stretch between 2012 to 2015, Andrew McCutchen was one of baseball's absolute best players, showing it wasn't a mere accident that he was doing extremely well. He finished top 5 in MVP voting all 4 of those seasons, and he also won the Silver Slugger Award and was selected to the All-Star game in all 4 of those years. There's an argument to be made against there being an MLB The Show curse, which at this point we have done an excellent job of. Kutch would be the absolute definition of it. He would fall off once leaving the Pirates, but his numbers were so good leading up to his appearance on the cover, and so much so that if San Diego Studios hadn't implemented a new no-repeat cover athlete rule after Joe Mauer's back-to-back run, there's a solid argument to be made for Kutch to appear on the cover again in 2014. But for then, he had to settle with being the first Pirate to win an MVP in over 20 years when John Dowd, Barry Bonds, last won it. While Kutch was winning the MVP award over in the senior circuit a year prior, Miggy was tearing it up in the American League, winning the AL's top honor in 2013. Kutch got the appearance on the back of the cover for MLB The Show 14, but it was Miguel Cabrera representing the Detroit Tigers for what would be the series debut on the PlayStation 4, which had released just half a year prior to the launch of the Show 14. The PS4 version was actually delayed until May of that year, while the PS3 and Vita version showed up in April for the first time in the series history. As for our dear cover athlete of the 2014 edition, while we already touched on Miggy being the reigning AL MVP, what we didn't mention is he was the 2-time reigning AL MVP. The American League having an MVP in back-to-back years is an incredibly rare feat in this day and age. To give you some context for the time period, only 2 players have won back-to-back MVPs as a member of an American League team just twice since the existence of the Super Bowl. Besides Miguel Cabrera, Frank Thomas did it for the White Sox in 1993 and 1994. To find another instance of it happening in the American League, you have to go all the way back to 1960 and 1961 when Roger Maris did it for the Yankees. Year for year, Cabrera's inclusion as a cover athlete at this point in his career may have had the best career of any cover athlete for the show. He was an absolute force to be reckoned with in baseball. His cover year saw him maybe come back to earth just a tiny bit, but he still finished top 10 in MVP voting. And he still nabbed what would be his 9th All-Star selection at the time. If we were to compare this 5-year run he was on at the time, this is technically his worst year, so in that sense, sure, curse away. But any MLB player would easily sign up for the year that Miggy had in 2014. A career-high 52 doubles, driving in 109 runs, and slashing .313, .371, .524 with an OPS of .895, included another 25 home runs to his total. The future Hall of Famer would start to see a decline shortly after his appearance on the cover of the show, but that would come a couple years later. But at this moment in time, and for this season, and even the following year when he led the AL in average and on-base percentage, the curse continues to not exist in 2014. I introduce to you the Peyton Hillis of MLB The Show, Yasiel Puig. Okay, that may be a little harsh on Puig, but talk about an absolute moment in time, flash in the pan that Yasiel Puig was. While Adrian Gonzalez ended up on the Dodgers later in the year in which he was on the cover, this is the first time an LA team was actually represented on the cover of MLB The Show. For Puig, he has had the shortest career of any show cover athlete, and while you could technically count the cover athletes in the 2020s as having shorter careers, they are still actively in the MLB, so for now, Yasiel Puig owns the honor. Now, players don't just get randomly put on the cover of video games. Well, maybe in 2023, but we'll get there. 2 years prior to this, Yasiel Puig finished second in Rookie of the Year, losing that honor to the late Jose Fernandez, and followed up that campaign with his first and only selection to the All-Star game. Nothing out of this world, but hints of a potential superstar in the making. He produced an OPS plus of 159 and 145 his first 2 seasons, and produced a WAR just under 5 with a 4.7 and a 4.9 respectively. But 2015, I think we officially have our second member of the show cover curse. Going into the 2015 season, Puig would be plagued with a hamstring injury, and less than a month into the regular season, Puig would be placed on the injured list for the first time in his career. He'd return in June of that year, only to injure his other hamstring 2 months later. These injuries would force his worst year to this point, playing in under 80 games, hitting just 11 home runs and slashing .255, .322, .436, and an OPS of .758, all which were career lows at the time for Puig. His hamstring issues would continue for another season in which he had a remarkably similar season. And while the following season in 2017 would be a bounce-back year of sorts for him, including a career-high 28 home runs, the rest of Puig's very short MLB career would be plagued by additional injuries and several incidents on the field. Puig showed incredible promise his first couple years of his career and currently plays in the Korean baseball organization. But the injuries, the suspensions he would deal with over the second half of his MLB career, it's safe to say that the show has its second victim of the cover curse. While Yasiel Puig was flaming out in 2015, Josh Donaldson was flaming on in 2015. So much so that he won the American League MVP in 2015. So how would the Blue Jay follow up that season? Well, with another MVP caliber season, of course. While he fell short of winning the award for his second straight year, much like Miggy had recently done, 2016 saw Donaldson by WAR have his best season with a 7.2, beating out his MVP year by a tenth of a point, which was 7.1. However, the curse is supposed to not only look at the current season, but some of the years following, right? Well, this is true, and whether Donaldson beats the curse is entirely up to how you interpret things. What you see on screen is a snapshot of Josh Donaldson's career from the time he was the cover athlete to the end of his career. His cover year was his last selection to the All-Star game, and also the last time he would bring home any hardware, as his second and final Silver Slugger award was also in 2016. As you can see on screen, while his 2017 season was also a pretty good year, despite missing some games, he completely falls off a cliff in 2018, as he was riddled with several injuries and was also traded to Cleveland. However, in 2019, he returns to top form, and although he does miss the All-Star game, he had one of the best defensive seasons of any third baseman. He received some down-ballot votes for MVP, and even won National League's Comeback Player of the Year. But outside of that 2019 season, his career post-cover just was quite disappointing considering how his career started. I'll say the curse didn't hit Josh Donaldson immediately, but it definitely had a delayed effect. This one I'm really curious for your opinion on, so let me know in the comments if Josh Donaldson fits the definition of the cover curse or not. In 2017, Ken Griffey Jr. had a batting average of 0, didn't walk a single time, and didn't record a single putout. What a bum. Okay, but seriously, this was the first time San Diego Studios placed a retired player on the standard edition of MLB The Show. Griffey had just been elected to the Hall of Fame the year before, and he was being included in MLB The Show for the first time since his retirement back in 2010. For obvious reasons, we can't say Griffey fits the bill when discussing the cover athlete curse, but in 2017, the statue at the then-named Safeco Field of Ken Griffey Jr. was vandalized, and as I already touched on, he's the only MLB The Show cover athlete to not record a single hit the year they were on the cover. Aaron Judge had an excellent 2018 season, but far removed from his Rookie of the Year performance he put on with his 2017 campaign, Judge produced a WAR of 5.9 and hit 27 home runs, drew 76 walks, and had an OPS of 919. But Aaron Judge is officially the third member of the MLB The Show cover curse. Yes, Aaron Judge may have had a good 2018 season, which included his second straight selection to the All-Star game, but Judge also happened to miss significant time to injury in 2018. I am merely basing his inclusion into the cover curse criteria simply on the fact of his time he spent injured, which is crazy because the year Aaron Judge could have had in 2018 could have produced similar results. And 2019 was almost the exact same situation. Highlighted here, you see Aaron Judge's first 4 years in baseball. Both 2018 and 2019 were almost completely identical. Almost the same WAR, just a 10-game difference in games played, 2 runs difference in runs scored, nearly identical doubles, actual identical home run totals, and a slash line is scary close to a complete match. The pandemic season was his worst one, but since then, Judge has shown exactly the player he was his rookie year, winning the MVP 2 out of the last 3 seasons up to this point in February of 2025. Judge doesn't have any long-term effects of an MLB The Show cover curse, but he immediately did, as he missed at least 2 months of action in 2018 and 2019, and also missed time in an already shortened 2020 season due to injury. Injuries alone, Judge has to qualify as cursed. Let me know if you disagree in the comments. Alright, now I'd like to talk about the cover of MLB The Show 19. Not just because it's literally what we're doing in this video, but I mean the circumstances surrounding the actual cover. The day I'm writing this video is February 8th, 2025. Just 10 days ago, San Diego Studios announced who would grace the cover of MLB The Show 25. I say this because in 2019, it was actually in 2018 that the cover athlete for the show was announced. In November of 2018, Bryce Harper was officially announced as that season's cover athlete. This was also part of their whole marketing campaign because at the time, Bryce Harper was a free agent. And in my recollection, this is the first time since Madden NFL 2009 when Brett Favre was announced as the cover athlete prior to the start of the season that the cover technically needed to be changed at release. Favre was traded to the Jets during the offseason and EA released a new cover of him in a Jets uniform. San Diego Studios released a preliminary cover of the show 19 with Harper in a hoodie as they played the Who Will Harper Sign With game and whose team will he represent this season on the cover of the show. It was kind of like a sweepstakes for you, so if maybe Harper signed with your favorite team, now your team is on the cover. He would eventually go on to sign with the Philadelphia Phillies, which is who he still plays for to this day in a very large, long-term contract. But the campaign produced arguably the worst cover for the series, because he didn't sign with the Phillies until February 28th, which was less than a month before the game's release date. Now, let's talk about Harper's actual playing that season. But first, let's talk about the year before. While he was an all-star and produced some good numbers, it didn't seem like a slam dunk case to be the cover athlete for the show at that time. Again, the marketing campaign was the whole point of featuring Harper specifically, and Harper's story of who he was going to sign with was the biggest story that offseason, considering he was one of the most sought-after players in all of baseball. Now, for Harper, his 2019 was actually pretty similar to his previous season. All his offensive numbers for the most part were similar, except you may notice a significant improvement in his WAR, going from 1.8 to 4.4. His improved metrics on the base paths as well as his defense led to the increase in that. He also increased his RBI total by 14%, going from 100 to 114. The biggest negative change year to year was walking 31 less times, which dropped his on-base percentage by 21 points. All of this is a long-winded way to say that he didn't see a declination in performance the year he was a cover athlete. In fact, his career seemed to have the opposite effect of the curse since he was on the cover. Since gracing the cover of MLB The Show, he has added 2 more All-Star selections, 3 more Silver Slugger awards, and his second MVP, which he won in 2021. Curse averted for another year. If you're a returning viewer to my channel, you'll know that I am a Cubs fan. The only physical copy of the show I own is this one, because it has Javier Baez as its cover athlete. Javi at the time of the release of MLB The Show 20 was one of baseball's most exciting players. Whether you're a fan of the Cubs or not, you typically enjoy watching Javi play baseball with some of his crazy base running maneuvers or his incredible power that he showed off. Javi was a member of the Cubs World Series champion team who they themselves broke a series of curses that plagued them for over 100 years. It's one of the greatest runs I've ever witnessed, and it happened to one of my favorite teams. Coming into 2020, Javi had 2 absolutely incredible seasons. In 2018, he finished second in MVP voting, won his first and only Silver Slugger award, and made his first All-Star team. 2019, he posted pretty similar numbers while missing a few games, but still by and large had an incredibly successful season. His stock continuing to rise as one of the younger and dynamic players on the field got him the nod for the 2020 edition of MLB The Show. And unfortunately, this may be one of the absolute worst performances for a cover athlete for the show, and maybe of all of sports, but is certainly curse worthy. For one, half the season was canceled because of the COVID-19 pandemic, so immediately this was already a cursed year. But Javi's 2020 may be worse than Yasiel Puig's 2015 was, and the only reason it can be legitimately argued is because it was a shortened season. As noted earlier, Ryan Howard had an absolutely dreadful start to his 2008 campaign, so Javi may have had the opportunity to turn things around, but as it stands, 2020 was a brutal year for Javi. So much so that it would be the final full year Javi would be with the Cubs, and he was part of the big sell-off of the Cubs championship team at the time. In 2020, Javi struck out 75 times in just 59 games. That would have put him on pace for 205 strikeouts in a full season. While Javi hasn't done that badly yet, he almost did the following year across the Cubs and the Mets when he struck out 184 times. In addition to the strikeouts, his average went from 281 in 2019 down to 203. Just barely above the Mendoza line. Gone was everything else because his on-base percentage was 238. Like, what? And a slugging of 360, setting his on-base plus slugging at 599. Let me say that again. His OPS was at a 599. This isn't a subjectively bad year. This is objectively downright awful. The only bright spot to Javi's 2020 season is this is somehow the only season so far in his entire career that he has secured a Gold Glove. So while his bat was an absolute dark spot in the lineup, you could count on him to be good defensively. His WAR of 0.8, somehow he still had a positive WAR, was the worst he recorded to that point in a full season in the majors. But don't worry, he tops that in 2023 when he records just a 0.6 with Detroit and a negative 1.1 last season in 2024. Yeah, unfortunately for this Cub fan, I have to admit Javi fits the curse very easily here. And it's really a shame because it was nice to finally get a Cub on the cover. And even though I think Chris Bryant would have initially gotten that honor if San Diego Studios had not chosen to put Griffey, that 0 batting average bum in 2017 on the cover. But, Griffey, I guess, deserved it for that whole Hall of Fame career he had. Fernando Tatis gets the Padres' first ever cover athlete to any video game to my recollection. If I'm wrong, let me know. But never has a Friar been given the honor, and for Tatis, like Puig and Judge before him, he earned the cover after some incredible play right out of the minor leagues. And for Tatis' cover year, he legitimately has his best season yet. Producing a 6.6 WAR, Fernando Tatis led the way in the senior circuit with 42 home runs, which included speed on the pass when he stole 25 out of 29 bases he attempted, which was good for an 86% success rate. Slashing 282, 364, 611, and an OPS of 975, and a staggering OPS plus of 166, garnered Tatis Jr.'s very first All-Star selection, his second Silver Slugger, and ranked him third in MVP voting, in which 19 cover athlete Bryce Harper ended up winning. Tatis' first 3 years, including his cover year, were a snapshot of what kind of future potential Tatis Jr. has, or maybe had. Because again, how you judge when the curse takes effect, you very well could place Tatis in this category. Although Tatis is far younger in his career than Josh Donaldson, since his inclusion as a cover athlete for MLB The Show, he has had some, let's just say, some problems.
Fernando Tatis Jr. had been rehabbing in the minor leagues. There was hope he could return for the next homestand, but that won't happen. In fact, he won't return at all this year. This afternoon, Major League Baseball announced Tatis has been suspended 80 games after testing positive for close to ball. Tatis has missed all of this year after suffering a wrist injury in a motorcycle accident in the offseason.
Tatis missed the entire 2022 season due to injuries sustained during the offseason leading up to spring training that year, and then was suspended later in that year for violating MLB's PED policy. Not a good look for anyone, but especially a rising star. Tatis' suspension would carry over into the 2023 season, causing him to miss the team's first 20 games or so. But in the meantime, San Diego also acquired Xander Bogaerts from Boston, which displaced Tatis. He was moved to the outfield and, oddly enough, won his first Gold Glove there. Additionally, he played in over 140 games for the first time in a season, despite missing nearly the entire first month of that year. With this, he recorded a career high in hits, doubles, and stolen bases. This was all good for a WAR of 5.5, good for second best in his career. And last year in 2024, Tatis would spend some more time on the injured list, and fortunately, he didn't have a recurrence of violating the PED policy this time around, and returned the home stretch to the playoffs during the fall. It was arguably his worst year from a production standpoint, but he did nab his second All-Star selection along the way. So like Donaldson, I might need just a little help on this one. 2021, Tatis' cover year was his best one to that point. But since that year, injuries and even an 80-game suspension have plagued the first part of his promising career. Does Tatis fit the definition of curse? Let me know in the comments down below. I loved Ken Griffey Jr. growing up, but I think Shohei Ohtani may be the single greatest baseball player I have personally had the pleasure of watching during my short time alive. I don't think anyone could have envisioned the type of player Shohei has turned out to be since he made the trek over from Japan. My initial guess when it was revealed that Shohei would be a two-way player is that pitching would eventually get the best of him and he would settle in as a designated hitter or an outfielder. And while I may have been right for one single season so far, I'm not entirely too sure if I'm going to be correct in the long term. First things first, for the first time in MLB The Show history, a pitcher graces the cover finally. And second thing second, if you follow baseball even a little bit, you probably know that Shohei is not going to fit the definition of a curse here. Hell, Shohei suffered an injury in 2024 to his throwing arm so bad he couldn't pitch the entire season, and he still played in every game but 3 as the designated hitter. I want to touch on his 2024, but let's talk about his cover year first since that's, sort of the whole point here. 2022 was his follow-up to what would be the first of 3 MVP awards for him. In fact, Shohei nearly did something that has only occurred once in MLB history, because if he didn't finish second in MVP voting in 2022, he would have joined Barry Bonds as the only player to win 4 straight MVP awards. But to his credit, Aaron Judge had quite possibly the greatest offensive season in modern history. The argument for Shohei is that he still had a great year offensively, but was also incredibly good pitching too. And Aaron Judge can't say that. But again, Judge did have a generational year, breaking the AL home run record mark with 62 that season, which is the first time 60 had been reached since the home run battles between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, and of course, Barry Bonds' record-breaking 73 back at the start of the millennium. Back to Shohei's 2022, he combined for a nearly 10.0 WAR through his batting and pitching with a 3.4 and 6.2 respectively. As a hitter, Ohtani doubled 30 times and hit 34 home runs, joining Mike Trout, Mark Trumbo, and Albert Pujols as the only ones to do it for the Angels over the past decade. For a full season, it would be his lowest total in stolen bases, and without a doubt, it was his worst year on the pass, as he was thrown out 9 times. This accumulated a 55% success rate. As a pitcher, Shohei would go on to have his best season to date, including the following year in 2023. In 22, as noted, Shohei produced a career-best 6.2 WAR on the mound, going 15-9 with a 2.33 ERA. His next best mark is 3.14, which he accomplished a year later. It was his best year to date in home runs allowed per 9 innings as well, with just 0.8, only allowing 14 long balls the entire season, which would be another career best, with 30 more innings pitched than his next 2 highest seasons. Despite the fact he threw 30 more innings in 2021 and 23, he also tied his best mark for walks allowed with 44, struck out 219, which is, just look at the comparison here because it's absolutely ridiculous the year Shohei had on the mound. Especially when you note that he was also the designated hitter that year as well. Unfortunately for Shohei, Justin Verlander had a generational year on the mound as well, and he was the unanimous choice for the Cy Young that season, which featured an 18-4 record with a filthy 1.75 ERA. Coupled along with that, he was coming off missing essentially 2 straight years of baseball, as he had only started 1 game during the pandemic-shortened season and missed all of 2021. A walks hits per inning pitch of .829, a BB9 of 1.5, and a strikeout 9 of 9.5, Justin Verlander 1000% deserved the Cy Young that season. But back to Shohei, it is safe to say the curse avoids him as well. While an injury would remove Shohei from the bullpen in all of 2024, as previously noted, he still played offensively and was able to pick up his 3rd MVP in 2024 for his efforts. Probably a good thing he moved over to the National League though, because Aaron Judge probably would have stolen yet another MVP from him because Judge made his 2022 MVP season look pitiful. It's seriously absurd the play we are getting from both Shohei and Aaron Judge right now, because I'm just incredibly excited to see if 2025 is able to confirm a potential new home run race between the two, similar to what we saw from McGwire and Sosa a quarter of a century ago. I have to admit here that Jazz Chisholm Jr. getting the cover of MLB The Show 23 confused me then as much as it confuses me now. On the Marlins at the time, Jazz was conceivably their best player, and in 2022 was able to garner the most votes for a second baseman on his way to currently his only All-Star game selection. However, his 22 season didn't even reach the All-Star game as he only played in 60 games and missed the entire back half of the year. If you ask me, Chisholm didn't deserve to be on the cover at all, and putting maybe Justin Verlander on the cover of 2023 would have made far more sense to me if San Diego Studios didn't want to do another repeat of Aaron Judge. Chisholm's shortened All-Star season saw him record only 54 hits, 14 of which were home runs, which is a solid mark. And that mark helped him drive in 45 runs and saw him slashing .254, .325, .535 with an OPS of .860. His most notable mark in 22 was an OPS plus of 138, which is certainly above average, but not out of this world either. Jazz, by all accounts, is a great ambassador for the game of baseball, but it certainly seemed like an odd choice to put him on as the cover athlete compared to anyone else in baseball right now. The season he was on the cover has been one of his worst seasons in baseball, but he's still an incredibly young player, and I don't think it's entirely fair to put him on the list of cursed cover athletes based on production alone. However, I do think it's fair to put him on the list of cursed cover athletes for his multiple stints he has spent on the injured list during his cover year, which in turn affected his 2023 production. He missed significant time throughout 23, and for a second straight year didn't play in 100 games. Additionally, he certainly didn't have the hot streaks he showed off in 2022. This caused a reduction in power numbers if elongated to a full season's worth of production. It saw all of his slash numbers drop, and his OPS plus drop off a cliff, going from 138 in 2022 to 99 in 23. Just to note that 100 OPS plus is the average ball player. He was under that. I do think that we should add Jazz Chisholm to the list of cursed cover athletes for MLB The Show, but is it fair to do so when he shouldn't have been on the cover in the first place? We finally have our most recent cover athlete for MLB The Show to discuss, the son of MLB Hall of Famer Vladimir Guerrero. Vlad Jr., there is a lot of pressure following in the footsteps of one of the greatest of all time, and sometimes players show the ability to surpass their fathers in the game of baseball. If you want to compare the first 6 seasons of Vlad Sr. versus Vlad Jr., Papa wins, and overall, Vlad Sr. was an all-around better athlete and player. But one thing Jr. has over his dad is more gold gloves, as Jr. has 1 compared to Sr.'s 0. But the point of this exercise is not to compare a current player to a Hall of Fame career with a full 16 years under his belt in the bigs. So what got Vlad Jr. the cover in 2024? It's going to seem like a broken record, but Vlad's 23 may not have been cover athlete worthy either. Certainly better than Jazz Chisholm Jr., but Vlad may have picked up his 3rd straight All-Star nod, but he did so with his lowest marks in home runs, RBIs, and hits since his rookie season. But still, he did have an above average season, posting a .236, .345, .444 with an OPS of 788 slash line, along with an OPS plus of 116. But before and after his 23 campaign, Vlad Jr. has proven to be one of the perennial superstars of the game. 2023 may have been a down year comparatively, but he was still at the top of the league as a player overall. Additionally, his follow-up in 2024 was more than enough to make up for a lackluster 2023 season. He piled on 40 more hits, including 14 additional doubles, 4 more home runs, breaking the 100 RBI mark, and nearly a career high in OPS plus with the 166. OPS also saw a significant jump, as we teed up already, when he improved it from 788 to 940. A huge improvement. Vlad Jr. definitely didn't get hit with the curse, and only being 26 heading into the 2025 season, he has a lot of time to absolutely crush his dad's numbers. Considering the head start Jr. got to the bigs compared to his father, I think when it's all said and done, somehow Vladimir Guerrero Sr. will be the second best baseball player in his family. With MLB The Show 25 coming out in just a little over a month as of this video's recording, we have not 1, not 2, but 3 athletes to watch over the season as it pertains to a possible curse. Gunnar Henderson, Paul Skenes, and Ellie De La Cruz are all premier potential future superstars of this sport, and I, for one,
we will watch your career with great interest.
If I were to pick one of these three to have the best year, I think it'll be Gunnar Henderson of the Baltimore Orioles. Mainly because I'm a Cubs fan and I would love nothing more than to see Pirate Paul Skenes and Cincinnati Red De La Cruz have absolutely atrocious years, but as a fan of baseball, admittedly, I do hope that they have tremendous years because the more superstars this game has, the more notoriety my favorite sport will continue to receive. But I am curious to know your overall thoughts on our experiment today. Do you think there is any smoke to the curse fire when it comes to being the cover athlete for MLB The Show? Or is this simply a Madden problem? Let me know in the comments down below. I enjoyed doing a deep dive into every MLB The Show cover athlete, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'd appreciate you dropping a like as well as subscribing for more content just like this. As it pertains to cover athlete curses, be sure to come back as we will discuss NBA, NHL, and the WWE video game covers to see if there is any potential there as well. See you next time.